On behalf of Partners in Project Green, I would like to welcome you to our monthly series of green technology webinars. For those of you who might not know, Partners in Project Green, developed in partnership with Toronto and Region Conservation and the Greater Toronto Airports Authority, is a growing community of businesses working together to green their bottom line by creating an internationally recognized eco-business zone around Toronto Pearson. For more information, please visit www.partnersofprojectgreen.com. For today's webinar, Ted Baker, a Senior Energy Consultant from Rodin Energy Solutions, has joined us from Mississauga to provide an overview of the Demand Response Program. Energy conservation and demand management are Ted's passion by helping companies and organizations learn new ways to reduce their facilities' energy footprint and to use government-assisted programs to improve project feasibilities. Previously, Ted was part of the successful BOMA Toronto Conservation and Demand Management team, delivering over 53 megawatts of conservation projects to large commercial BOMA members. He has honed his energy management experience at the world's leading energy consultancy, National Utility Services. You can take it on now, Ted.
Okay. Welcome, everyone, and I thank you for joining the session today. And as Alex has stated, I've been doing this for a while now. Demand response has been a personal passion as well. It started back in 2007, I guess, and when the program was, being talked about at the provincial level, and the grid was in a little bit shakier state than what it was today. So they created the demand response, or a contractual arrangement that they were willing to help customers reduce and pay them for that reduction. So I'll launch into the to the session now. If like Alex has also stated, if you do have questions, please feel free, and I'm sure there's going to be questions pop up throughout, and other people may have those same questions. So I'm going to try and deal with them as they come up while we're on the topic, and try and address them right then and there so everyone can ask the same, or we can move on to the next thing. So Rodin, I guess, is the, to start this process, I need to give my keyboard, page down, and now my screen doesn't want to cooperate. So you guys are showing my screen. And Alex, I'm not able to move my screen now.
This is interesting. So neither am I.
Oh, sorry about that.
Perhaps,
yeah, all of a sudden it's just stopped.
Perhaps, Ted, if you could get out of the presentation view and maybe just navigate through the edit mode for now.
Okay, there we go. Okay, I can do that. And if that helps there, I can do that. Okay, show my screen. There we go. Sorry, folks, I apologize for that. Anyways, Rodin is a leading smart grid company. We are integrated with the ISO and with many of the power producers across the province. I guess our main claim to fame is we were a metering company before the market opened up, and have been a successful metering company across the province. So we support the Pickering Nuclear and several of the major power stations, their metering requirements for those projects. We are also an approved aggregator through the OPA. We also deliver the OPA Peak Saver program for the home residential. I guess the RDR is the technical name for that program. We are also a meter service provider, so any company that is doing a FIT project or has a power producing project, we will typically register or assist in registering those projects with the ISO, so you can be a market participant. We are used and called upon quite regularly for market assistance and intelligence. We have over 40 field agents across the province that have their pulse on what's happening out on the street, I guess you could say. We do a lot of the power reliability studies for the major power producers, so we're quite active in that field. and I guess we've got a full fleet of engineers here in our Mississauga office. And okay, so demand response, what is it? Many clients that we do participate, I guess the simple way to start the process, it is a contractual agreement to reduce your energy consumption by a set amount that we have proven and all agreed upon, and we enter into a contract. In exchange for doing these tasks, entering into the agreement, you will get paid for that strategy. Activations notice will be issued on a predetermined program, and the program is very specific. It is weekdays only, no weekends, no holidays, and the program hours are very specific from 12 noon to 9 p.m. on the option C, if you will, program. There are other options where if you're a commercial facility and you can only participate in demand reduction during business hours, basically 12 noon to 6 p.m., there is the ability to operate in that program as well. So we have various methodologies. You know, you think of the home peak saver program where Rodan sends a signal from its Mississauga head office, and we can activate the thermostats that have been supplied by your local utility, and we send a signal to that thermostat to affect the change that has been pre-programmed in that thermostat. So we do have the ability to do that with our customers, but in most cases we, you know, and for a whole bunch of reasons, liability, and we don't take control of their operation. We create a plan, a curtailment plan. They appoint an internal champion to manage the day's event, and they will affect the change that we've all agreed upon. I guess the methodologies that we will use, so we can use distributed generation. The grid itself will use demand response as a safety mechanism. If the supply cushion in the grid is reduced, they will use demand response to reduce the peak, or the demand in the province. We also have the ability to control appliances when customers and homeowners give authority for their LDC to be able to affect change on those systems. And again, DR is a useful tool. I was at a presentation yesterday, and the ISO made it crystal clear that demand response does help them. So instead of having to go to another fossil fuel peaking plant or a natural gas generating facility, they'll use the demand response enrollees or customers as a method to cool the demand rather than having to add more power to the grid. So it's, and again, it's a very specific window that you have to operate within, and the province views it as a valuable tool as we go forward. The system has got a greater issue of surplus base load, and they're looking to use demand response potentially to help affect some of those changes as well. So I guess I'm going to show a few slides on the smart grid, and we've all heard various terminologies on the smart grid. Demand response is, I guess, at the top of the food chain of the smart grid, where you can actually affect change remotely, impact the performance of the grid almost in real time in 15-minute intervals. Rodan and I guess the suite of demand response providers or aggregators, we contribute very significantly to that stability in the grid. And it's basically at a low cost form of generation. So they view us as, instead of turning on, you can turn off, and for that you get paid, but it's a fairly reliable source. And we've got 4 years now of track record to prove out that it's, and the customers all, buy into the concept. They're able to perform every time. So the smart grid, as the ISO sees it, this was from their report in 2009, but I don't think it's changed a whole heck of a lot. They're basically looking to get all of us connected and control and manage devices when required. they would prefer that we all do a significant portion of our work and our loads after the main peaking hours, or the hottest summer hours, or in the wintertime, I guess more in the 4 till 7 p.m. range. That's when we all get home and do our stuff at home, and that's what's hurting the grid in those times. And they have to build the system so that there's a cushion for those times. So they've got to obviously overbuild for those potential times that are the greatest, and the balance of the time when we're all normal operations, it's cloudy and it's there's no need for additional capacity. That's where the excess comes into place. This is just a diagram again from the ISO and how they see this contributing. I know at the event yesterday, the electric vehicle is still an unknown. They're still trying to understand its impact or its future impacts. Once the costs come down, we are, as the consumers, are expected to take up more of that and driving and using more of that stuff. And again, in the discussion yesterday, you've got several other technologies that are intermittent, solar and wind. When a giant cloud comes over, the grid sees a 250 kilowatt it's receiving, and within 3 to 5 seconds, it's now not receiving it, that volume. So the grid has got to be very responsive to those types of events and when they occur. So they're using the smart grid as the tool to manage these things better. That's the ISO Smart Grid Plan. They've laid out a clear vision on how they see this going down, with some of the recent announcements that the long-term system planning division, which is the OPA, and the short-term, immediate-term system planner are set to be merged. So they are now integrating more of these strategies into their everyday type of operations. And this just showcases that in the future we are going to be smart. Our time of use meters are good, and it's certainly going to help this generation, but more importantly help the future generations understand their impact on a grid. And if you understand your impact and it's financial, they're expecting you to make a change, I guess, is the methodology. So DR works very specifically. It's a call delivered by the ISO, or Independent Electricity System Operator. We receive that at our Mississauga head office at our Network Operations Center. We then we have a team of people that will send out an automated message to all of our contractual contributors via email, phone, or text to the people that they have identified in their contract obligation. So, the first guy in line is the plant manager, and he's away. It'll automatically go to second in command. We quite regularly will have multiple people listed so that everyone knows what's happening. The CFO will get a silent message so that he knows the plant is affecting a change, and they're going to be expected to operate in that fashion for a 4-hour window, and then they're expected to resume operations immediately after that 4-hour window. And that's a fairly significant point, that normal operations are being done up until the call is activated, and then resuming normal operations. Those two things basically create a U in your hydro consumption, your level, your normal consumption. You take a noticeable and discernible dip, so it drops off at the time that is requested and required by the ISO, and then immediately following, you go back into normal operations. That U shape on your hydro profile fundamentally is what you're getting paid for. And the more people that deliver those U's, the more kilowatts that the ISO can receive from that set amount of curtailment, that is where the stability in their grid, and they're counting on it because they know our portfolio, they know all of our portfolios, and they're expecting that U to happen. We also are monitoring all of our host of customers remotely at our Mississauga office, so we can see a customer's performance. We're well aware if something isn't happening or if something is happening. And I guess plant manager is wasn't prepared for today or for any number of reasons, we are monitoring and trying to assist them to get back as per their obligation and approved a plan, and trying to ensure that they can participate. And if they cannot participate, we also still need to find those kilowatts that we have reported because our book of business, shall we say, has to deliver as promised. And I guess the final piece is once you do perform, you will be paid for that availability and for that performance. But I'll get into that in a little bit. Typical loads I've identified here. We do these on a consistent basis, and they're consistent performers. And I say that because it needs to be a repeatable solution. You don't want to impact operations dramatically. A simple shutdown of a production line. That is a very good and simple methodology. You may have 4 lines running at a plant where you can simply turn one line off when we advise you 5 hours before, and that line will get the maintenance for the day. So there's a lot of these technologies that can be affected. Building automation systems are a very successful way of participating, which obviously affects the HVAC and the lighting. In some of the commercial sites, you can use elevators. If the grid's in distress, do you need your bank of 16 elevators all operating, or could you operate on 10 of them only? And quite honestly, most customers believe they could for a 4-hour window in the day. A lot of the ice rinks that are year-round are able to participate. We have arrangements with them where we can give them, or large cold storage, we can give them notice, and they will overcool leading up to the exact time of an event, and they will harden the ice. They will get extra hardened ice, or they will overcool the refrigerators, and for the 4 hours then they will activate their plan and reduce, and for those 4 hours they're seeing little to no discernible change in obviously the temperature in those freezers or the temperature of the ice, not enough that it's going to warrant not wanting to get paid. So the motivation is to do it, and the grid is appreciative. The other methodology of participation, and Rodan works with several of their accounts to use on-site generators to produce energy, but basically they are reducing their load that the customer is consuming. This is not a program where we are looking to use generators and put electrons onto the grid. This is to displace electrons that you would normally use. You would run the generator, and again, that generator needs to be clean and meet the 2011 Ministry of Environment standards. So if your generator is clean and you have the switchgear in place, we can use that to take up your load from the grid. So that's a very successful methodology as well. This is just a quick chart or a quick example of some of the revenues that are available. This is a standard customer operating in the standard zone in the province, and I'll explain that a little bit as well. The OPA have dictated that there's certain areas in the province that are under greater distress, duress than others. And I guess the zone north of Sault Ste. Marie with their hydro plants with water and so on and so forth, and the amount of power consumption, large-scale consumption up there, some of the mines, that is a non-participation zone. They're not willing to pay for curtailment up in those territories. The southwestern Ontario area, outside of Windsor, and some of that hard-hit manufacturing sector, the grid stability and with some of the new generation that's come online in the last few years has also made that area a 50% reduction of incentive amounts, because the grid is fairly stable and they've got enough capacity out there. It's more in the greater Toronto area, Golden Horseshoe area, if you will, all the way up to the Ottawa area that we now refer to as standard zone pricing. And to put it in perspective, using a curtailment number. You've got 100, 500, 1,000, or 2,000. Just using the megawatt or the 1,000 kilowatt threshold, you can see that you're going to get a monthly payment of $8,000 for creating a plan, agreeing to the plan, and being available to reduce. So it's a fairly substantial benefit when you multiply these numbers times 12, then you multiply them times several years. It can be a very lucrative way to do business or to support the operations when required. So keep moving here. I've kind of glazed over the financial numbers, but again, I'll get into that in a little bit greater detail in a future slide. The next slide is how do we go about doing this, and it's a very specific process. And again, I state that it's very specific because more importantly, it's got to be repeatable. This can happen up to 10 to, the contract typically is 200 hours in a year when you divide that by 4. So that's 50 events potentially this could happen for. Since the program started, and I do have a document that I can show everyone the past history of events called in the province, it's anywhere from 10 to 15 times a year. But the first step is doing an assessment of all of the loads that you consume in your site, your building automation system, evaluating it, your generator capacity, evaluating it, actually performing a test with the generator to see when it is running and the switchgear is put in place, what can your displacement be off the grid. So once we've done the on-site assessment, we go to the next step, which is a capacity test, and we use this as part of our measurement and verification plan for the OPA. We've proven it, we've tested it, we've verified it, and it is repeatable. And once we have done a test or two, if it's an intermittent test, we like to do multiple tests to again prove out and M&V the process. We then enter into a DR agreement. It's a fairly straightforward document. States our obligations, states your obligations, with a signature and a proposed start date, and obviously the agreed upon financial agreement. We then forward that host of documents to the Ontario Power Authority. They then review from their system reliability standpoint and do their due diligence, and from there we are then accepted into the program. You will then be, once you're accepted, you will then get a welcome session. I was at one of those this morning where we welcome the customer into the program. We go a step-by-step what is required of them. We leave them with a package so that we can monitor them remotely. We go through a detailed analysis, and we're basically in commercial operation mode at that point. So when there is a call, or if there's a call, they're ready to perform.
Ted, I have a quick question.
I started the conversation.
Ted, sorry.
Sure.
Just how long, is there a general timeline as to how long steps 1 through 5 will take? Is it a month's process, or just a few weeks, or a couple weeks? Or does it really depend on the facility that you're analyzing?
So to answer the question, it really does depend, and I guess you can imagine if you're using a generator, that is a pretty straightforward analysis. We schedule a time, you turn on your generator, we watch the load displacement off your hydrometer. That's a measured and verified result right then and there. We would have all of the data on the generator. That process can take 2 weeks, so it can be done fairly quickly. Then you get into the more complex solutions where you're going to shut down lines and use building automation. You want to make sure that you've captured everything you can. Those can take up to 4 weeks to 5 weeks to actually do the assessments, verify it, do the test to confirm, and complete the process. So that can be up to 5 to 6 weeks to do.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. So I started the conversation at the very beginning with unique challenges as well, because we all know there's challenges out there to do this kind of stuff. Demand response has been around for several years. It's widely known, or it's it's understood that it's out there, but participation hasn't been widely adopted. I guess that would be the best way. So I've indicated that the building automation community on its own typically don't regard a super threshold. You've got normal operations, but creating a secondary set of perimeters embedded into the system as a requirement because the customers don't spec it. It's not part of the specifications when they design the systems, so they don't do it. So reprogramming the systems and connecting new loads to them is obviously always a challenge financially and structurally, trying to get in and do some of the work. I've also used BAS systems once we get them installed, or we've measured and verified that everything cooperates, and someone's cold in their office and they go and effect a change that someone's complained on the 3rd floor, so they've gone and modified it, and now the results aren't what they were expected during the event. And we're calling the day of to find out why aren't you performing, and well, I've impacted the changes that we had all outlined, but someone on the 3rd floor has done a bunch of things to the system. We've also had several of the systems not actually be able to perform. Pneumatics are not cooperating. Several reasons. I think the challenges, the generators, they didn't get activated. Quite often, we've also heard the story that Bill was off today, so he didn't know and he didn't tell anybody. So there's real challenges, and like I say, it's a contractual obligation that you've entered into. I've got some other slides, but I wanted to, I've closed off on this side of the presentation.
Ted,
so the
we do
ISO believes that demand response.
Sorry, before you conclude, we do have a Steve Smith who wants to say something. I've unmuted your line, Steve. If you've entered the audio pin, you would be able to be heard. Steve,
Can you hear me?
Yes, right now we can.
Yes, I can.
Yeah.
Fine. Yeah, we do have a little bit of experience with the DR program, probably one of your competitors, and one of the things that's given us some trouble, I'm not sure if it applies to you, is say we have a, 500 kilowatt commitment. So the day of an event happens, we're called, and then when we get online with them, there's a 2-week baseline that's established somehow prior to that day, and when you look at it, sometimes we have to give up 700 to 800 kilowatts because you have to get into the baseline range. Is that something that occurs with this system?
This occurs in the program itself, and it's not 2 weeks, it's actually 4 weeks. The current methodology that we have to measure your reduction, that we spoke of at the very beginning, it's 20 days, and we take the highest 15 of those 20 days. Those days of consumption now become your baseline days. So you've consumed X over those 15 days, and the day we're asking you to perform, those baseline days are again used as what you normally would have consumed to now what you've reduced, and if that threshold has not been met, then yes, having to dig a little deeper is what is required, correct.
Okay, so it is a similar type situation. Sometimes it works to your advantage and sometimes not, and my kind of logic is that day of the event is the day you need the 500. If we can, as we've done in the past, show that we can reduce that 500 by certain equipment, having to stretch it to 800 because of this 15-day baseline sometimes makes it a no-go.
Well, again, you're referring to utilization or the actual day of the event. And the financial obligation is not as great on the utilization. If you have demonstrated that you've reduced the 500 kilowatts, but your baseline is what has been eroded in the past 20 days, you're only affecting your utilization. You're not going to affect your availability payments. So that's a very significant point right there. You basically, for 12 months of the year, are demonstrating you're available for that 500. You're getting paid for those months that you're available, but on the day of an event that you're not perfectly able to commit to based on whatever reason, if it's manufacturing or if it's just on how processes have been modified, it's not going to affect your availability payments that you've been paid for throughout the year as well.
Right. Okay, thanks very much.
I'm not sure if that's answered your question, but it is a good question, by the way.
We also have another question actually from Susan. Are the baselines set during high demand periods, for example, summer versus winter?
The baselines are set from your, well, I guess there's two ways of baseline. So if you are to enroll or were to do a test, it would be, we would do an annual test. So we would annualize your baseline results. So that would be testing your enrollment going in. For proof of performance for an activation, it would be the 20 days previous to the activation. So it's very specific. They don't annualize your baselines for an activation. That's done the 20 days prior to the event being called. But when you're enrolled, we annualize all of that stuff up front. So I hope that maybe has answered that question.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, I'm going to get into a couple of case studies if I can. I guess just a quick slide here on the U.S. demand response. I wasn't aware of this, that Texas used DR as a very big play down in their jurisdiction. They were headed to brownouts. Remember last year they had a terrible, terrible heat wave for months and months and months, no rain or anything, and they were really struggling to keep up with their electricity demand and air conditioning load and all that kind of stuff. And they did use demand response as a lever to help offset some of that. You know, and I guess the other point, utilities ask politely. I deal with utilities regularly, and we are a savior for some of those guys as well, because they see some of the distress in their local little pocket, and we are able to help them. The Ontario market for DR is very similar to the California market, so it's got its unique challenges, but yeah, it works. This is a good slide as well for demand response versus energy efficiency, and I do believe in both. I believe done properly, and I've stated from my early days of my career, demand response can help fund energy efficiency very well because it is a no-cost solution. If you can understand your operations well enough, plan to create a curtailment plan, the revenues that you generate will allow you to do more energy efficient measures within your facility. So it's a good play to do. It does make sense. It's financially sound decision to do. And again, all of those bills are directly attributable to your hydro account. You know, they will affect your peak demand because you're in that period you are reducing when called upon, and those are typically the moments that your peak demand is set on your bill as well. Gone through a bunch of that stuff, but I wanted to get into, this is basically a flow of how we operate. So we receive a signal from the ISO. It transfers to our operations center. We then send a signal to a site, exactly as I've discussed earlier. You affect what you've got to affect at your site, whether it's the loads or the generator. We then have to settle all of that performance. So we then prepare our statements to the OPA that yes, everybody performed. And as that gentleman has said, you know, there'll be certain times that, you know, he was requested 500, but due to baseline analysis of the past 20 days, they weren't quite as high in that period in the last 20 days. But they actually, their contract stipulates they've got to do 500 kilowatts. We will always take a slightly softer approach and maybe not enroll at that 500 so that the curtailment is not going to be burdensome. It's easily achievable. Again, there's a risk versus reward. You know, in that customer's case, he's getting paid for the 500 kilowatts, but he's got to work harder to deliver it when required. If you had to work on 350 and got paid 350 and had to deliver 350, it's a simple system. You know, you get to handle your plan, and you will get paid for over delivery. If magically he delivers 500 on that day, you will actually be paid for that as well. So it's your paying threshold as a corporation. It's your level of understanding of your operations, and that we take great pride in working through that with the customer and helping them make some of those decisions. I've used a case study of a condo just for, from a commercial side, because there are, the industrial side is pretty straightforward a process. We've spoken a lot of that. So it gives you an idea of all of the loads that we identified at this site.
Sorry, Ted, before you go into this
Yep.
particular case study, we do have a question in regard to the what you were talking about before, about
Sure.
the requirement of the load that the company needs. So Alex is asking, if I need to deliver 500 and only deliver 250, do I get paid half of my payment?
You get paid half of your utilization payments, correct. And there are thresholds in the contract that you need to deliver. There is a minimum threshold. So if you have not even delivered your minimum threshold, you may have removed your right to receive a utilization payment altogether. So there is an agreement that you need to deliver X percentage of your contracted amount.
Perfect, thank you.
I hope that's answered your question, Alex. You don't want to enroll for 500, deliver 250, and you're looking at me a month later when your payments come in. Why are you not paying me for that month? Well, hold on a second. You said you were going to deliver. We've proven you can deliver 500, and for whatever reason your operations have changed and you can only deliver 250, then we need to be aware that you can only deliver 250. Quite honestly, you could have changed operations and removed half of the production facility. It's gone somewhere else. So we need to modify that commitment so that you're still able to receive an availability payment for exactly what you can deliver. So the issue in the industry has been the disconnect from communicating those facts. And I'm going into a fairly lengthy discussion on it because it's a very good point. It's a working relationship. We have entered your load to the ISO and done a contract to the ISO that this is going to be delivered. So it needs to be, well, they're relying on it. And same as when they go to a generator, they're relying on that generator to generate what they say they can. And when they call them for 150 megawatts, they're expecting 150 megawatts. So it's the same kind of arrangement, and they get paid for 150 megawatts. So anyways, I hope that explains it a little bit clearer. But it is a good question, and keep those questions coming, folks. I'll try and address them as clearly and openly as I can. Getting back to this case study of a condo, very straightforward commercial building. You can change it, from a condo to a commercial site, whatever. Shopping mall, they all operate in a similar type arrangement. Modify with VFDs, pool pumps, water fountains. The common area, they shut down 1 in 4 lights, so obviously all common areas. Again, understanding you're talking daytime, you're talking very structured hours of the day that it's not going to impact. They shut down some of the elevators, and they upgraded their generator because it was completely at its end of life. So we enrolled them for a 125 kilowatt commitment. And as you can imagine, or we've talked several times now, we didn't enroll them for too much. They're not getting paid for a full-size generator and reducing a whole bunch of load. We hedged a little bit and gave them a comfort zone that would be easily achievable and repeatable. So for that 125, in the round numbers that we were talking about from our previous presentation, and again, as a simple example, it's $100 a kilowatt. They're making $12,500 per year just for being available to perform all of those tasks that we've just laid out. So that's a zero-cost solution, and they've been paid $12,500 a year to do so. So I'll move on to the next commercial facility. 10-passenger elevators, lots of HVAC chiller load, lots of stuff happening. It's certainly, we don't, if it's in the middle of summer they're going to need to run most of that HVAC load. You know, as per codes, you've got to have certain air circulation levels. You can't just shut everything down. So we, again, to make this clear, we enroll them at a reduced amount, a comfortable, repeatable, whether it's October or in the middle of a heat wave in July, they can still deliver this 100 kilowatts every time. Their baseline will have an impact, but going back to the point made earlier, if they got to 85 kilowatts out of the 100 based on a baseline, they delivered 100, but their baseline forced them to deliver 115. We don't view that as a material fault in their performance. They did deliver. It was the baseline. Rain 15 days in the last 20 days, and now we're into a heat wave, and we've got to be called upon. So that kind of dictates how we enroll those types of customers. There are some different types of programs. Some of them are more active than others. Specifically today, we've been talking about the DR3, the contractual reduction, and that's what I wanted to showcase to the PPG customer base and the Pearson EcoZone group, that companies in this area can curtail. There is methodology for it, proven, delivered, and there's payments. So we make payments on a regular basis, so it does work. Peak Saver does work. I believe we're over 200,000 homes across the province that actually get activated by this. You sign up with your local LDC in whatever jurisdiction, and they either do it themselves or outsource that service through someone else. The other products listed at the top is DR1. The take-up was very, very low in the province, where this was kind of a trial run, if you will. But the incentive amount is so low that very few people participated in that program. And similar to DR2, it was hard for companies to get their head around shifting operations, that we will pay you to change all of your manufacturing processes to evening or off-peak hours, basically 9 p.m. to 3 in the morning, so you're using the excess base load in the province. But that take-up wasn't very strong in the province, so it hasn't been dealt with too much. This showcases the program hours. From summer is 12 to 9 p.m., and all other seasons is 4, which is all other seasons. So you've got 4 months, June, July, August, and September, and the rest of the year it's from 4 p.m. to 9 p.m. And there's 2 options, and they're financial. The difference between these 2 options is financial. When you make a longer-term commitment for a wider range, you get paid more. But if you're very structured and can only operate 12 noon to 6 p.m., then they don't pay quite as much for that. But they are always a 4-hour call, and always Monday to Friday, no weekends, no holidays. A big part of the solution that we offer is a tool that a data logger that we connect to the hydrometer, the revenue grade meter on site. So we then take pulse outputs from that revenue grade meter, and it feeds an online portal, a secure online portal, that you are able to view your performance live. And you can use it for daily tracking of your demand. You can see operations start first thing in the morning. You'll be able to identify why at nighttime are we still consuming so much power when everyone's supposed to be gone home, and you may find out that your generator or your compressor still remains on, and there's leaks, and in the middle of the night you're getting a spike because you're having your compressors going back on automatically. So Interview is a very good management tool that we supply as part of our enrollment process. So we have a standardized DR drill. I think we've reviewed some of this stuff in our earlier presentation. But again, it's having a repeatable process in place to be implemented. That's pretty much my side of it. I also wanted to go through these conclusions. I guess, as I stated, in all our talks with the ISO, they view us as a very solid contributor to the grid. Instead of activating new power sources or having to build new power sources, they use this as a tool to stabilize the grid. I also view demand response as a very good tool to help upgrade your facility's energy performance, whether it's be through building automation or upgrading your generator. If it's at end of life, it does allow you to generate some revenue to improve your facility operations. You know, this is one of the key points. You can earn revenue from your existing stuff. You don't need to go and buy new stuff. There is no obligation to do any of that stuff. These savings show up on your hydro bill. They're proven and measured, so they automatically show up. And I guess in Rodin's case, we are the only Ontario-based organization. We've got good competitors. They're all formidable competitors down in the U.S., and they have Canadian operations up here as well.
Actually, sorry, Ted,
Ted,
just to your point right there,
yep.
Steve has asked me a question about that specific point. So how is
Sure.
Rodin different or better than its competitors, and how many are there in Ontario?
Okay. Well, there's 5 registered aggregators on the Save On Energy or the OPA website. So there's 5 registered aggregators today. How are we different? I guess, and without tooting my horn too much, but I've shared a bunch of the conversation today on doing it right the first time, and it's kind of the company mantra to do it right the first time. We don't want to put you into a contract or an agreement with the province that is going to be erroneous on you to perform. So that's one way I can tell you we are different, because we've heard from many customers that struggle to deliver what they're obligated to deliver, and they are not receiving the payments that they anticipated because of their non-performance. Had they simply enrolled for a lesser, more achievable, repeatable solution, they would happily be receiving those payments on a regular basis. So that is one of the key ways I find that through my experience that we've been identified as a differentiator in the game. I've stated that we're the only Canadian operation with a network operations center here locally in the Ontario jurisdiction. All other signals are delivered from the U.S. marketplace and then forwarded to the customers from the U.S. That may not sound like a big deal, but we're getting a lot of communications from LDCs that the Patriot Act, we're sending data and signals and contractual obligation information through to the U.S., which violates the Patriot Act. Can't comment on it. It hasn't come up from Rodin's perspective, but I can tell you there are several LDCs that take a very strong view that they do not wish to violate the Patriot Act and its implications. So I, again, hope that answers your question on what sets us apart. We've got qualified people here to do it, seasoned people. We're, as in my initial slide, we're also a trusted partner by the ISO, by the Ontario Power Authority. They use us as a guidance tool. They use our input and resources to help solve other issues on the grid, and we've got people on the ground to help that occur. And I guess with that, kind of concludes my presentation here today. If anyone else has got any questions, I'm quite happy to participate.
Great, thank you, Ted. That was really great. Are there any other questions from the participants? If you need some time, just let me know if you want to type them in the chat section.
Very good. And I guess I'm going to have these presentations available. You'll have them, Alex, and if anyone wants a copy of them, they can have them.
Yes.
I'm quite comfortable with that.
Perfect.
I guess that's it from my side.
Yes, so everyone would just like to thank all the participants for joining in, including our webinar partners from Greening Greater Toronto, Better Buildings Partnerships, and the Canada Green Building Council Greater Toronto Chapter. So thank you again for joining us. If you have any questions, feel free to contact us at info@partnersofprojectgreen.com. If you have a specific question on demand response, please contact Ted Baker at ted.baker@rodinpower.com. And again, a recorded version of this webinar will be sent to everyone and will be made available online very shortly. So I hope you guys all enjoyed it. We do have a question also, a few actually. Well, George Kennedy has a comment from City Toronto, and Roden was selected from an RFP process for the 1,700 city buildings. And David had a question for you, Ted. Will the OPA pay for the building automation improvements for the BAS if they are used for demand response as well?
Thanks for the question, David. And you and I have talked about this question in the past, and it is a pretty standard response. If you can demonstrate a energy reduction with a building automation system, you can get compensated or apply through the Save on Energy CDM program and demonstrate the savings or the projected savings that the BAS, Building Automation System, is going to deliver. And then that can also enable or better enable your demand response strategy as well. So it's not a specific check, shall we say, going to be written for BAS for DR implementation. It would be a check being written for a proven building automation system performance on the site, and then your site then is better able to perform for demand response.
Great, thank you. We do have a question from Philip as well. I just unmuted your speaker, Philip.
Hi, my question is about sort of, obviously there's some capital costs to implement this, and are there like simple paybacks, you know, timeframes on that?
I guess, so capital costs that you discussed.
Well, yeah, like, so, you know, you'd said in one of your examples they turn off 1 in 4 lights, right? So if you do that, obviously you have to implement, you know, controls. Like, let's say it's not a manual thing, right? So, but that means you have to wire the lights differently, etc. So, I mean, on a new building, new project, you can plan for that, etc. But say on an existing building, you know, or like take the example of the generator. When they bought that generator, you know, they could be buying more than what the previous one was, so they could take advantage of demand response. So, do you find that there's a general level of payback, or is there, you know, or is it just all over the place?
Yeah, it's it's a little bit of both. In this industry, as you know, it's a little bit of both. In a higher context, if you use a figure of $100 per kilowatt reduced, that kind of determines your payback. So the cost of enabling lighting controls to be able to deliver 100 kilowatts of reduction, I would think that's going to be a fairly substantial lighting retrofit to get control of to be able to deliver 100 kilowatts. So I'm going to be able to pay $10,000 towards that cost of retrofit. So I hope that answers one side of the question. Now I'll go on the generator side. Typically, with the generator world, we're seeing if it is there is no generator and you want to use a generator, you can, with all-in cost, it's over a 5-year payback. But when you add in the cost benefit of having a generator where you never had that in the past, the benefit of operations, or, you know, in some cases food spoilage, all of those kind of components, they all factor into your ROI. If you have an existing generator and you simply need to remediate that generator to meet the 2011 Ministry of Environment or MOE standards, we're typically seeing that payback in a 2 to 3 year time frame. So maybe, okay. I hope that's answered your question.
Yeah, no, that's good.
Okay. But it is all over, I can tell you that. It's all over the place, and every account is different, every customer requirement is different, but there are no costs if you have control of your site, or it's a line, a manufacturing facility. All of those things can be done with no cost.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Ted. Oh, sorry, if you were going to say something else, go ahead.
I just see one more question by Keith, and it was, could you comment on the trigger levels / process? And I guess to define that process, what Keith is referring to is what signifies or what triggers a DR event in the province, and what process. Yeah, I chuckle or laugh a little bit. We've never actually received the criteria laid out by the ISO. They keep that a very closely guarded strategy. They are the body that dictate. We do know that a price mechanism is a trigger. A supply cushion erosion or reduced supply cushion is another trigger. So you got price, you got supply cushion, and available load, I guess, is what the other. There was 3 triggers that they have outlined, but they change, and they don't give us that formulation the day of, we've triggered because of this. We don't get that response. We just get, activate this area, this settlement zone. We need you to participate today as per your contract, and do it. So I hope that answers your question there, Keith. And I guess that kind of concludes our session. We're at 1:58. I hope everyone's enjoyed.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And again, thank you for the participants for calling in and joining us. Have a great afternoon.
Cheers, everyone.